South Africa has released proposals aimed at overhauling its migration system. The draft policy aims to provide a framework to guide the granting of residency and citizenship to foreign nationals, as well as the protection of refugees and asylum seekers in South Africa. Pretoria says thousands of undocumented migrants arrive in the country annually, with almost 4 million migrants already within the borders. Well, to help us analyse South Africa's plans is immigration law specialist Stefanie De Saude-Darbandi, who joins us live from Cape Town. Stefanie, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for speaking to us. Now, you've obviously got some insights into this white paper that Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi presented a few days ago. Just give us an overview of what you've picked up. What stands out the most for you?
Good evening, yes. And there are a number of things that stand out. Firstly, the paper itself is disturbingly blind to the role the department itself plays in many of these problem areas. It doesn't address the underlying crisis or immigration crisis that we currently face. It doesn't acknowledge the department's responsibility for the crisis. And it wrongly implies that foreigners are a net negative for South Africa. Also, one of the major complaints of the paper is that it blames our problems on international law, when in fact the legal obligations it's complaining of actually flows from the Constitution. So even if South Africa did withdraw from the international refugee law treaties, we'd still have to offer asylum seekers the rights that they currently have, because that flows and arises from our Constitution. So the paper itself, to be honest with you, I think the minister's time would be better spent trying to deal with the backlog and clear the current backlog. There are a number of problems with the papers. I don't think the issue is with our laws. I don't think it's necessary to change the laws. Perhaps a change in minister would be necessary at this time. But the biggest problem is the implementation by the Department of the law.
So how does Home Affairs Minister Aaron Motsoaledi characterise the current South African Citizenship Act? And what is his rationale for proposing a radical overhaul of citizenship, immigration laws?
I think the issue is he probably wants to tighten the laws. He wants to make it a bit more difficult for foreigners to qualify for visas, permits, and citizenship status. He speaks about in the paper, for example, that the current law allows for foreigners to acquire permanent residence and citizenship status prematurely, when actually, anybody that's been through the process will tell you it takes years to become a permanent resident and then years to become a citizen. So I'm not really sure what the problem is. He also, I think one of the biggest issues with the asylum seeker process is giving asylum seekers the right to work and study in South Africa. But again, this isn't the right that flows from the international treaty. This flows from the right to dignity. And if he wants to address that, if he wants to prevent asylum seekers from working in South Africa, then the solution is simply to reduce the time, the waiting period for decisions. And that is one of the biggest problems with the Department of Home Affairs. Applying for a visa, applying for a status can take years, and people have the right to dignity and to live a life of dignity, and that means to work and to earn an income.
Now, it's pretty ironic that Aaron Motsoaledi, at this time in the history of the African continent, is embarking upon a law that makes coming into South Africa, or certainly trying to live here, a lot more stringent. Whereas you go to the east of the continent, for instance, I mean, you look at countries like Kenya, you look at Namibia, in fact, you look at Kenya, you look at Rwanda, recently saying that Africans will come into their countries visa-free. Only a few months ago, the nations of Namibia and Botswana both agreed that their citizens would not need passports in the not-too-distant future. So why would Aaron Motsoaledi come up with these stringent laws when the rest of the continent is looking to become more liberal, if you will?
Well, it's a good question, because our very own president speaks about South Africa being open for business and being welcoming to foreigners, when that's really not the case. And this is why I started my discussion with perhaps it's time for a different minister. But he seems to, the mentality and mindset is that, he doesn't trust foreigners, they're here to pull the wool over his eyes, they're here to take work away from South Africans, when, most of these foreigners, especially people that qualify for status in terms of the Immigration Act, they either bring with them wealth or skills. A lot of them are entrepreneurs, a lot of them create employment. So, it's a very good question, and we wish he would answer that. But if these questions are put to him, he has this habit of deflecting and blaming. And we don't really get the real understanding of why make these changes, when South Africa is also supposed to be on the same trajectory in terms of allowing Africans to travel freely through and to South Africa.
Now, you suggest that Aaron Motsoaledi is probably not the right minister. It was time for a ministerial change. What prompts you to that line of thinking?
Well, he hasn't done much in terms of his assignment to this role since, I think, 2019. I remember attending a roundtable meeting with him, and, it was one of the first meetings. It was shortly after Gigaba stepped down, and he seemed to be determined at that stage to make a difference, and a good difference. But since then, not much has happened. I mean, we've launched unprecedented amount of high court cases against the Department of Home Affairs, mostly for delays. And for the first time in many years, and I've been doing this for 16 years, the minister and the DG, they don't comply with court orders. We'll have high court orders against them. We'll have contempt orders against them. There's just no real interest in complying at that level. So you can imagine dealing with people at a lower level in terms of trying to extract outcomes. They're just totally non-responsive, and this is been under his control.
Now, when we take a look at just how much blame is being put on foreigners as far as crime and unemployment issues are concerned, how much of this is actually fact? And I know that one of the statements Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi likes is that statistics or numbers don't lie. How many foreigners do we have in South Africa? And what are those numbers that are occupying jobs that ordinary South Africans should have?
Well, he doesn't like foreigners, and he doesn't like immigration practitioners and immigration lawyers, and his numbers are unfortunately not reliable. I think recently I saw an interview where he just denied that the backlog exists, and I think on Tuesday in a Home Affairs Portfolio Committee meeting, he published a spreadsheet on the number of applications that are outstanding, and I mean, it's completely different to the reality. Just in the last month, we've launched probably 3 high court cases dealing with a total of about 800 outstanding applications. So vastly different to his statistics. So again, I don't think we can rely on his numbers. And then, again, when dealing with the Immigration Act, we're speaking about people with either a link to South Africa in the sense that they have family, or they have skills, or they have money in terms of retiring or establishing a business. So people applying in terms of the Immigration Act are not here to take jobs away from South Africans. They either have skills that are not in the labor market, or they're creating employment by establishing businesses.
Stefanie, so I've run short of time, but I have to ask you this for a rather quick response. Now, there is an expectation that people will react to the white paper, yourself included. Now, what happens when individuals or organizations make comment to this white paper? What is that process if your recommendations, for instance, suggest that certain parts of this white paper are not desirable, or are not fair, or are not justified, or impinge on people's human rights, for instance?
Well, hopefully they take that into consideration. I mean, in 2019, just after the lockdown, we were sent, our law firm was sent a copy of an immigration bill to comment on. And in that first bill, Home Affairs had removed permanent residence as an option. And we made representations to that, and why that, that's bad for the country, and why permanent residence should be an option, etc. And in a revised paper that we received, they'd actually considered that. So that's a good sign, and we want them to take our comment into consideration. Otherwise, what is the point of opening this up for discussion?
Stefanie, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for speaking to us on Africa Today. There was immigration law specialist Stefanie De Saude-Darbandi. Thank you for your time.